Hello everyone, and welcome to the Quick Tip of the Week. My name is Jason Pierce, and today we're going to talk about the importance of research and business valuation. My practice is in Boston. I specialize in business valuation and forensic accounting work. I see reports from other experts frequently, both good and bad. I've identified a number of recurring issues and put them together for today's session. We could spend a whole day on the importance of research and business valuation, but I only have a few minutes, so let's get right to it. So up on the screen here, we have some guideline standards which everybody should be aware of. The FRE, Federal Rules of Evidence, Rule 702. If you haven't checked those out, I would encourage you after we're done to go to federalevidence.com, just like it sounds, and you can download them for free. So we're only focused here on the one, Rule 702, in that the testimony, in order to be qualified as an expert witness, is based off sufficient data or facts. And it's similar in the professional standards. I've got the NACVA up there that members must obtain and analyze applicable information, but it's very similar throughout the other standards, and even in Revenue Ruling 59. So now that we know it's required to gather and analyze the data relevant to the engagement we're working on, the main objective with all this data is to minimize the objectivity in our report. Not enough to rely on management's forecast of sales and net income. As experts, we need to understand the internal and external factors to determine whether the assumptions are reasonable. In other words, trust but verify. So look at those contracts, the study, historic sales by customers, or whatever you need to do to get comfortable giving an opinion on the valuation. I've got a couple examples here. EchoCamp versus Bestie, and which is 10 years old at this point, but it's a good one in that the expert adjusted compensation without doing any due diligence. No interviews, no comps, little research. That's what happened. Bad things happened. The Dauber Challenge, the testimony was excluded. And then I've got a recent one here, R&R International, and this is one of those I can't get enough of. It's unsupported assumptions riddled throughout there. And my favorite is the reliance on Wikipedia. When we look at Wikipedia, let that be the first place you go, not the last place, not the last thing you rely on. I would love to keep going, looking at a bunch of court cases, but I think you get the point. Since we're doing the quick tips, let's just do some do's, and then I got another slide for don'ts. And if you have any questions afterwards, just the data you use. You want to stay current with the literature. If you don't subscribe to BV Wire, those come out regularly. Takes you longer to eat your sandwich than it does to read one of those emails. Then the Morningstar book, it changes every year. How many of you read the book every year? Okay, put your hands down. That's a good percentage. But for those of you who didn't put your hands up, you need to make sure that you read that book every year. There's a lot of things that change, and some of these issues, like data-adjusted size streams, or beta in general, is just one of those issues that have gotten a lot of traction lately, so we want to be up on that. And then our RMA discussion. Now, I see this time and again that folks will rely on RMA and don't necessarily know either where the data is coming from, banks, or how the data is calculated annually. That plays into how we rely on it and how we go about calculating our ratios. The data is not random. These are self-reported. And there's some international sources. So two of those things you just need to be ready for when you're asked about that on cross-exam. Not difficult to overcome, but if you get hit blindsided on one of those, it's going to be tough. RMA recommends that you use their data as guidelines, supplements to other sources. That's probably one of those things that you just want to use in general, is don't hang your hat on one particular data or study or source. If you use a couple different sources to say, adjust that officer's comp like we saw, you're going to be a lot better off at the end. And then finally, we've got fiscal year. I'm surprised at how many people don't know the fiscal year for RMA is April 1st through March 31st. So in other words, their latest study, which is the 2011-2012 book, is through March 2011, making it appropriate to compare the 2010 financial statement. So for those of you who like math, N-1. 2011 -1, that's the year we want to use. Now the don't use Duff & Phelps for financial service company evaluation. There's our banks, insurance companies, real estate. That's excluded from the data. So if you're using one of those companies or valuing one of those companies and using the Duff & Phelps, it's not apples to apples anymore. Don't use models you don't understand. We could go through a number of different scenarios here and models that are out there that if you haven't read them and understand them, you shouldn't use them. Those of you familiar with Occam's razor, it's just one of those things that come to mind. All things being equal, the simplest explanation is best. Don't forget the regional and local economy. I just was looking at a report last week. It was over 100 pages, and probably 30 of that related to the two national economic reports that they were cut and paste directly into the valuation report. But gone was the discussion of the regional economy and certainly no mention of the local economy. So with that, you can't forget to take information and apply it to your subject company. Even if you just take a paragraph here and there and say inflation's important, interest rate's important because we have debt, et cetera, and then move the economic data into an appendice, then you're going to be much better off than if you just paste 30 pages of economic information into the report and hope that more is better. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention. I'd be happy to entertain questions or comments. Please email me or look for my contact information on the NACVA website.